Today's conversation, we're going to reflect upon this quote here from Sun Tzu to understand how to further embody the ideal self-image in relation to our vision. And the quote is, "Every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought." In the last video, we spoke about transmuting fear into faith. And this process of transmutation of fear into faith can also be looked at part of the journey of self-realization. And these battles that we have in our mind, which externalize as battles with others, with environment, with circumstance, with information, the source of it is based on what is stored within our own mind. It is related to our self-image and what we are embodying, which is stored in the subconscious. This self-image is presenting itself as the reflections or the outcome of how we perceive ourselves to be in circumstance, whether we overcome it or transmute it into opportunity rather than seeing it as an obstacle, or see it and identify with it as an obstacle, as something that holds you back. So what we want is to embody more so each day this self-image that we see in ourselves when we see ourselves at the end, the vision. That's why I titled this mind map here, "The End Wills the Means." This self-image is on autopilot, and it is revealing reality from the perspective of itself. Now, two books that inspired this conversation was Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, as well as The Quantum Leap Strategy by Bryce Pritchett. These two books have been my go-to in different stages of my life, and especially when it comes to evolving my self-image to be in alignment with the next vision that I have. And what we find is that there are certain circumstances or experiences that a person has in their life in which they feel stagnated or stuck, or some kind of internal blockage or energy that seems to send them on a certain loop in which they're replaying the day-to-day life again, and nothing seems to be moving. This is why I recommend having mental tools that you can work with, such as affirmations. And one of my mental tools is actually the Quantum Leap Strategy book. And if I ever find myself in a situation where I feel unnecessary tense to make a move or to act on a decision that is going to transcend me from certain binding of loops of patterns that are reflective of previous self-image, not in alignment with the ideal self-image, I pick up a copy of the book and I read it cover to cover. And the way the book is articulated is designed to get you to move through that internal resistance and to actually take what he refers to as the quantum leap. Now, also inspiring this conversation is Maxwell Maltz's book, Psycho-Cybernetics, in which he, and I paraphrase, states to really live, we must find the self-image that we can live with. You must find your self acceptable to you. Let's go a little deeper into this. All throughout our journey in life, there were clues, there were insights of who we were becoming. It was there. If we reflect back on our life, we'll see that usually in earlier stages of our lives, we were inspired by certain activities, maybe certain careers or professions, certain lifestyles that we wanted to live. It was there. It was within us. However, our self-image was formed because a lot of times we were in theta state of mind in earlier stages, and we were very susceptible to the information that was presented to us. The information that was presented to us from external sources formed this self-image. Then as we progressed through this journey, we realized that we allowed this information a lot of times unknowingly, to form this self-image. However, there's a part of us that wants to live how we ideally want to live, the identity that is reflective of how we really want to be, or some say, who we were destined to become. It is during this time where we have this internal conflict. And this internal conflict may last for a period of time, or maybe last for 10, 15, 20 years, or maybe an ongoing journey. As far as I'm concerned, when working with the self-image, that is what this Sun Tzu quote is referring to. That's the battle. The battle is, do you live your true ideal self-image, or do you revert back to past self-image that was perhaps not something where you really felt like yourself embodying? So we want to be able to accept ourselves, and the acceptance of ourselves is found in the ideal self-image. So a person sees a goal or a vision, and that's why we work with this logical levels model here. And they see themselves at that end, behaving a certain way, thinking a certain way, interacting with others a certain way. That's the vision of the identity. Now that identity, that vision, thinks a certain way, believes reality to be a certain way, has certain values, has certain capabilities. In other words, certain skills. If it's a career or a profession, they may have certain skills like programming skills or marketing skills or certain kinds of skills that are related to that role that they are fitting in that vision. Each day they go through this internal journey of transforming and becoming more of that self-image on their day-to-day careers. Let's say they go to work and they're confronted with aspects of themselves. And it is revealed in their incongruence, on their inability to communicate as effectively as they would like to have communicated, or, specifically put, see themselves in that end communicating. We want to see this as an opportunity, because when we look at that and say there's some incongruence going on within, we can then ask ourselves, what can we do to maintain that high fidelity, high congruence way of being that's reflective of that vision, that self-image? We have to first accept where we are right now and accept that we are on the journey to further affirming and embodying the self-image. When we go back and realize that we had many of these insights on earlier stages of our journey, of who we were becoming, we can learn to trust ourselves even more. We realize that that's where we truly will feel like we want to express from that perspective, which is the next point here. Have a self-image that you are not ashamed to be, and one that you can feel free to creatively express, rather than to hide or cover up. If a person feels that they're not able to express the way that they want to express, or they're ashamed, we want to then go and look at certain interpretations that they have within themselves that is preventing them from expressing in that way. This is why journaling, as I call it, cause and effect reflection, is very important. I also recommend, as you identify this kind of interpretation within yourself, to work with some kind of subconscious modality to change these programming elements within yourself into programming elements that are reflective of the visions. That will allow your journey to be a lot more smoother as you further embody the self-image, such as affirmation. And we talked about this in the last video, ideally doing it in state akin to sleep, in which the overly conscious, overly critical ways of thinking are excluded out of consciousness. And you can allow the affirmations to seep into the subconscious, forming the ideal self-image. To do this, we have to know ourselves, which is one of the common threads of spirituality and working with the mind. Know thyself. Know both the strengths and the areas of personal development, and be honest with ourselves concerning both. We want to further affirm the attributes that are ideal and reflective of the vision, how we see ourselves to be. the certain skills that we see ourselves cultivating, the behaviors. We call this being productive, or any kind of thing in personal development that is behavioral based, and environments that reflect that vision. Certain environments seem to stimulate us, and they're more in harmony with that vision. Think of it as a plant that needs a certain kind of environment, like a tropical environment, for example, in order for it to be nourished and for it to grow. We also benefit from being in environments that nourish us, specifically the self-image, to further affirm itself. And thus it is reflective, because in those environments you'll notice that your capabilities and your skills are more expressive. For example, if you worked in a company, and in this company you felt that you could express, you could share what was really something that you wanted to bring up and discuss. And it was a kind of environment that encouraged it. What you'll notice is you'll automatically communicate effectively. You will be able to further embody that ideal self-image because you have placed yourself in that environment that is encouraging. Same is to be said about an environment for an athlete. For example, I'm a fan of going to the gym. I like working out at home, definitely. Over the last year and a half, because everything was closed, I was working out from home. I prefer, however, to work out in a gym, and especially the kind of gyms that I like going to, where I can feel a certain way while I'm at the gym, and I can feel the energy of everybody else around me. And those kinds of environments further motivate me. It's not something that I would say would be a requirement, because if for whatever reason may be that was not available, you would still do the workouts wherever you can do it. But however, if you have a preference in the matter, you would pick an environment in which you're stimulated into creativity or expression or cultivation of the capability or the ideal behaviors. Environment, we want it to be reflective of the vision, and the environment is becoming the vision. So the vision will one day be brought forth in the environment. In other words, you will live that end. To further discuss this, I want to bring up a request that was given to me the other day, which I thought of integrating into this video. And the premise of it was essentially somebody going down a career path, technical career. And what he suggested is that, and it's true, a lot of times they tend to focus on these technical skills because that's what's going to relate to, advancing in their career and so forth. But there comes a time in a person's career where skills like communication, leadership, selling, and I don't necessarily just mean selling, traditional selling, or consultative selling, but selling ideas, effective persuasive communication becomes important. Sometimes what happens is a person has conflict with these areas because they are so embodied in an identity that they have constructed for the vision of becoming that technician or that computer programmer. But then when it shows up that the next area needs to be cultivated, such as the communication skills, the leadership skills, and so forth, they feel inner resistance. They start to doubt. They start to reveal the fears. And as we discussed in the last video, the fears hold the key and lead us down the pathway to who we want to become. So in other words, we're not running away from our fears. We are, you could say, confronting our fears. But I would look at it more from making peace with those fears, understanding them and making peace with them. It is from that perspective that we understand this quote here, where it says, "Every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought." If a person has inner resistance to embodying those soft skills, like communication, leadership, and so forth, they might find it more challenging as they are communicating with people, as they're dealing with environments or others in a team setting. They might notice that they have unnecessary conflict and they don't seem to relate with others, and thus they're unable to see certain projects into completion. So what they want to do then is understand that there's an internal conflict between the identities, the past identity, which once served them, and who they are destined to become. this identity that has the ideal communication skills. Once they step into that identity, and we'll talk about how to do it, they will notice that they're able to communicate more effectively. They're able to relate with each other a lot more effectively. And they're able to create harmony within the team, the organization, and so forth. Now, how to do this is a couple things. Number one is there's actual capability. So there's skills, communication skills, actually going out and learning the communication skills, the persuasion skills, and what are the aspects of communication that really translates over to somebody receiving the information in high fidelity, understanding it, and acting upon it. The same is to be said about behaviors, like listening to another person communicate and understanding rather than waiting for them to finish to give them a response, really understanding what they're saying and then from there adding to the conversation. These kinds of behaviors are going to give us two insights. Number one is our level of congruence, and number two, what to optimize. There are many books, there are many trainings on improving communication skills in a broad array of contexts, different environments, and so forth. We want to first make peace internally, which may bring forth certain fears, with the ideal self-image in which we are becoming. As soon as we know that that's what's happening within ourselves, we'll find ourselves embracing moving into those experiences that further cultivate those capabilities and behaviors. And environments. For example, a person might decide that they want to become more of an effective communicator, and one of the suggestions that they might find is to join certain organizations in which people get together and talk and share and deliver speeches, such as Toastmasters or something like that, or even small meetup groups where people get together and practice communication by sharing about something that they're passionate about. And then others give feedback on how that they can improve their communication skills. However, something within themselves is preventing from going down that pathway. In order to help us transcend past this self-imposed block or resistance within us, we want to value a few things. Number one, psychological tools. And number two, the elements of flow from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book, Flow. So psychological tools such as affirmation, visualization are very helpful because what they do is they bring us into a higher degree of congruence with that self-image in which the inner resistance to do that thing that we know we have to do is excluded out of consciousness. For example, one of my favorite psychological tools, and what also inspired this video, is The Quantum Leap Strategy by Price Pritchett. It's a very small book, and when I find myself having inner resistance, and I've used it for many years, regarding doing the thing that I know I have to do, the certain behavior, going into a certain environment, cultivating a certain capability, that I know that is one with that vision, actually going into that environment, which is reflective of the vision, and the self-image from the past, or sometimes we say paradigm, is preventing us from, and the preventing is happening within ourselves, from going into that environment or doing that thing. I pick up a copy of The Quantum Leap Strategy, and I just read it cover to cover. And it's something about how the book is written that really takes that simplicity that is condensed in and does something within the mind. It changes perspective around. And then all of a sudden I find myself doing the thing that I know I need to do and experience what he refers to as the quantum leap. Because then when I go down that direction, things change. Things change in the most unexpected ways and even in the most obvious ways. Obvious in the sense that I actually did the thing that I know I needed to do. Or unobvious ways that are brought forth via the subconscious, as we've been discussing. But we don't need to figure out those details because that's all happening, the means to will the end. So having a tool like that, and even in the last video we talked about releasing from the reactivity and going into a space of pure awareness, such as working with meditation, which can also, through mindfulness, act as a psychological tool. It's important that we have these tools available for us if we find ourselves resisting internally to further embody this ideal self-image, because we want to be that person. Because if we reflect back on our model here, and we've been discussing this all throughout our videos, when a person is embodying or embodies to a high degree that self-image that is one with the vision, they will have joy, bliss, and flow when it comes to cultivating the capabilities, whether you're a musician, whether you're an artist, whether you're aiming to communicate effectively, learning hard skills, soft skills. Your behaviors will continue to be more congruent. Whatever it is that you are looking to develop, you will find it a lot easier to develop, and thus, and again recognize this important quote, every battle is won or lost before it is fought. And what I found is that this battle that is happening within, if we go to a high level of where this battle is occurring, it is occurring in the self-image. It is essentially our ability to step into the ideal self-image and live in and from it, and thus experience the harmony as a result of it with the capabilities, behaviors, environment, the end result, the goal, and so forth. Or conflicting in our mind, not being the person that is who we really want to be, and thus the revelation of that is conflict in our outer world, in our five sensory experience. Another important element that I encourage is the elements of flow. Having a clear vision, valuing the immediate reporting and feedback that you get each day. For example, let's say you are moving towards your goal and you decide that you are going to, we'll use the example given, you now decide that you want to cultivate communication skills. For many years, you've worked on your programming skills. You're very proficient. You rose up in your career to a certain level, and now you want to lead a team. Perhaps you might even want to start a business down the road in which you have a team, in which you're working on an app or a development project. So now you see yourself at the end embodying that communication skill level, that which you would consider to be a leader or effective communicator. So you try it. You pull a team together and you present and you say, here are some ideas that I have of how we can get more effectiveness out of our programming sessions in a more collaborative way. And you notice that you're communicating, and then all of a sudden you seem to be stressed, frustrated, maybe not articulating as clearly as you'd like. Maybe people seem, as they look at you communicating with them, they seem to be confused as to what you're saying. Now, as a result of that, you have immediate reporting and feedback. You realize at that moment that all this is an opportunity for you to integrate what is being revealed in that experience into your self-image, so that when you go back to that same environment, that same experience again, you'll notice that you are a lot more able to communicate from a place of effectiveness. You'll notice that you're a lot more congruent with them. Whatever that reporting and feedback that you might get, perhaps you weren't making eye contact in a way that was warm and connected. Maybe you're not integrating the three things that we talk about when we read that book, The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Cabane, power, presence, and warmth. Power being direction, presence being deeply engaged and listening and understanding, receiving the real-time feedback and responding mindfully to the point where they start to understand it deeper and form a mastermind. Maybe there wasn't enough warmth in the communication style, and thus they were feeling this resistance to the communication, which was formed by the resistance within ourselves, which was expressed by our inability to be warm in that moment. All of this is immediate reporting and feedback. One of the things that I recommend is to note these things down after the presentation And then go on YouTube or go find a book, go take a workshop and develop those areas. See those as symptoms of incongruence towards the ideal self-image. And that's not a problem, because when you recognize these things and you work on these things, by optimizing the behaviors, by optimizing the capabilities, by optimizing the environments, what will happen is that you'll get better at it, and then the environment, that particular experience will feel more natural. And it is when it feels natural that you have successfully embodied that ideal self-image that is reflective of the vision. Now, as the self-image forms, and we're relating this now back to the elements of flow, we'll notice a number of things. Actions and awareness become one. So when the actions and awareness become one with what we're doing, we are embodying the self-image. So we want to place ourselves in flow-based experiences where we embody the actions that we are doing, and we are one with it, and it seems and feels authentically effortless, one with. We also notice that distractions are excluded out of consciousness, because we've been discussing this. Fear could show up, but holds the key to further understanding, that we can go in within ourselves and understand what this fear means so we can transmute it into faith. Watch the last video. But as you maintain this self-image or flow that is reflective of the vision, distractions are automatically excluded out of consciousness. So does fear of failure as it tapers away. Self-consciousness, as in you not judging yourself or pretending to be someone that you're not. None of this is referring to pretending to be that self-image. We're talking about embodying, stepping into that self-image. There's a distinction. We also might notice distortion of time, one with, and we say the activity in the person becomes autotelic. So let's go back a little bit. We want to embody the ideal behaviors, the ideal capabilities, the ideal environments that are reflective of the vision via the self-image. And we have this internal conflict within ourselves, perhaps, with our previous self-image and who we aspire to be, and that's fine. And what we want to do is understand that that's happening within ourselves and find the incongruences within ourselves, and then change how we relate to those experiences, those environments, and so forth, by first valuing it and knowing that this is really what's happening. And as we continue to value the reporting and feedback, harmonize with the challenge and skill, because in flow we say where challenge meets skill. So if something seems way too challenging, a person can become very reactive and identify with certain aspects of doubt or fear. And a lot of times this doubt and fear is habitual thinking from the past. And this is where we revert to working with the 6 basic fears that we learned from Think and Grow Rich. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. These are the ways that fear can show up on the way to embodying with a high level of fidelity and congruence that ideal self-image. So when we feel the tension, when we feel the reactivity, know that what is happening is we're fighting a battle within ourselves. That's the inner resistance. And it could be related to fear. And as we discussed in the last video from the Joseph Campbell quote, it holds the treasure that we seek. So we have a fear of poverty. We can change how we relate to ourselves in relation to the attribute, criticism, and so forth. For example, in the communication skill cultivation, they may receive feedback from that audience that which they're communicating with in that office environment, and they may take it as harsh criticism. The thing about this is that we're talking about this from the perspective of every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought. So it's the fear of criticism. They're going into the interaction, fearing the criticism that they're just imagining. And what we find in those scenarios is that they do not play out in the way that we feared them to play out unless we so identify with it, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is the battle that we're fighting in the mind before we go into the interaction. So we make peace with it. We say, we value the reporting and feedback. We value the challenge. We recognize that this is part of forming the ideal self-image that is one with the vision. And thus we embrace whatever shows up. We integrate whatever shows up, and then what you'll find is you will transmute the meaning of criticism into valid reporting and feedback. And that does not mean that you need to integrate all the feedback and reporting that you get. Some of it might not be related to the vision of what you're looking to achieve. Some of it might. But at least you won't have that fear. And it's that identification with that fear that seems to also create that inner resistance of embodying that ideal self-image. Now, why is it that I work with such a simple psychological tool, quantum leap strategy? Because of something that they discuss in the book, actually. It's called Suspend Disbelief, in which they state, suspend disbelief and act in complete faith. Do what you'd do if you knew you were going to succeed with confidence. Live in full conviction of your ideal self-image. Suspending the disbelief that is a symptom of not allowing the ideal self-image to be embodied to the point where the past self-image is no longer integrated in your being. We have a few ways of going about doing this. Number one is to identify the limiting interpretations, the beliefs in relation to our goals, the skills, and so forth, and change them, as we've been discussing. As well as, in the moment, to be able to transcend past it, suspend disbelief by working with one psychological tool, such as the one that I recommended, or anything like that. Because then what happens is you'll automatically do the thing. And you'll live that way. And you'll also find that that becomes a habit. Then, going back to the example given earlier, when a person discovers the next phase of their journey, they'll find that it's easier to step into that ideal self-image. So to bring this into summary, what we want is to embrace that fear and recognize that this battle that we fight with ourselves, which is a lot of times related to fear in a resistance base, is something that happens in the mind first before it plays out. And we want to be able to address it at the source, which is the self-image. When we set a vision, when we see ourselves going to an end in which we cultivate certain skills, present certain behaviors, and be in certain environments and integrate with them from a place of flow, when we see ourselves at that end, we are going to move into that direction. We are becoming just that. And we are becoming it through our identity or our self-image. And all we need to do is reflect on our day-to-day journey and identify certain disempowering, limiting interpretations regarding these fear elements, make peace with them, and move into that action or whatever it is that we have to do so we can release from the stagnation and further embody that ideal self-image. And for me, as I mentioned, when it comes to inner resistance, I just refer back to, I just read the quantum leap strategy. The way it's articulated, the way it's communicated, some way, somehow moves me through the resistance. And then I do the thing. And then I know that by doing the thing, I'm further embodying that self-image, who I aspire to be. And through the repetition of living this way, you step into the next self-image, and the journey continues. And then what happens is when you step into the self-image, the behaviors, the capabilities, and the environments, you embrace them. You're not in conflict with them. And you're not fighting a battle with them because you have won the battle in your mind. So I trust you found this video to be very helpful, further discussing what we have been revealing throughout our conversations, which we're going to get into further discussion on, because it's important to identify, no pun intended, that the identity is what is playing out as theater, as the battle. If you want a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.